Useless. The word didn't come softly. It was spat like a stone across the break room table, loud enough that the vending machine's hum couldn't cover it. I remember the chuckles that followed, the way chairs scraped back in lazy agreement, and how nobody stepped in to stop it. That silence was worse than the insult. Silence confirms the sentence. I sat there with my paper cup of stale coffee, eyes lowered, and felt the word land heavy on my chest. Useless. Not undertrained. Not inexperienced. Not even slow. Just useless. A verdict, final and flat. You learn, in moments like that, how a room really sees you. It wasn't just my coworkers. My uncle used the same word at Thanksgiving when I told him I wanted to build something of my own one day. "You can't even keep a job at a desk," he said, carving turkey with the sharp finality of a judge's gavel. My friends laughed at the idea too. To them, dreams were currency too expensive for someone like me. That night, walking home past neon signs flickering over empty streets, I kept replaying it. Useless. The word scratched at me like sandpaper. I thought of my mother's tired eyes, her hands raw from years of factory shifts. She deserved better than a son branded worthless. I swore, somewhere between the bus stop and the crumbling staircase to my apartment, that I'd make the word choke in their throats one day. But swears are fragile without action, and action demands humiliation first. The next morning, I walked back into that office and swallowed my pride, while the laughter hung in the air like a bad odor. I filed reports, fetched coffee, absorbed the mockery. But beneath every nod, every yes, sir, something sharpened. I started watching more closely than I had before. I watched how contracts were drafted, how clients were handled, how numbers slid across spreadsheets and became decisions that shaped lives. They thought I was too slow to learn. In truth, I was studying harder than any textbook ever asked me to. When you're branded useless, you earn a strange kind of freedom. Nobody expects anything from you. That means nobody notices what you're building in the shadows. I built at night. I saved in small increments, quarters, and crumpled bills. I took free online courses with the glow of my cracked laptop as my only company. I learned about markets, about strategy, about the brittle egos that hold businesses together until they collapse. I failed again and again, but failure has teeth that sharpen you if you don't flinch. The word useless followed me everywhere, like an echo in a canyon. But echoes fade. They just take time. And years later, when the same people who laughed at me shuffled nervously in a line outside my office door, resumes clutched like lifelines, I realized something. That word had been the best gift they ever gave me. It gave me fire, and fire builds empires. I didn't become somebody overnight. Truth is, the years after that insult were the hardest because they were invisible. Nobody claps for you when you're struggling in silence. Nobody applauds the nights you sit at a kitchen table lit only by a weak bulb, bills spread like accusations, notebook margins filling with ideas you're not sure will ever matter. Most people want victory in the span of a movie montage. Real life doesn't play like that. Real life is repetition. Endless, grinding, lonely repetition. I worked shifts that ate at my bones. Days at the office where I was still the useless one. Evenings lugging boxes at a warehouse where my name was just a number on a clipboard. Each paycheck came already hungry, rent, groceries, the loan sharks of utility bills. What little I could spare went into a jar I labeled seed. That jar looked pathetic at first, $3, then $12. But over time, coins and crumpled bills grew into something sturdier. In those hours, I found a strange companionship with my failures. Every time I botched a client call or lost a side gig, I didn't just curse myself anymore. I asked why. Why had the client walked away? Why did that project collapse? Each mistake was a page in a book no one else was willing to write for me. That book became my education. I remember one winter especially. The heating in my apartment had given out, and I worked wrapped in a coat, breath fogging in the air as I typed. I was studying business models then, learning how small service companies scaled, how contracts were structured, how leadership wasn't about charisma but consistency. The cold bit into my hands, but the numbers burned in my mind like firewood. There were moments I nearly quit. Nights I looked at that jar and thought, what's the point? The voice of every critic crept back, useless, useless, useless. But then I'd picture my mother, sitting at our old kitchen table with calloused hands and no complaints. If she could grind through decades without losing herself, I could grind through a few years without surrendering. The world outside didn't pause for me. Friends drifted. Some mocked me for always being too busy, when really I was too broke to join them. Relationships cracked under the strain of sacrifice. Loneliness became a kind of shadow that followed me everywhere. But here's the secret. If you stay long enough in the dark, you learn how to see in it. By the time I hit my mid-20s, the jar had turned into an account. The account turned into a plan. The plan turned into my first small venture, a risk most people would have laughed at if they'd known. But they didn't know. Nobody paid attention to the useless one. And that invisibility, that disregard, was my shield. Because while they mocked me, I was building. And what I was building was almost ready to surface. It happened on a Tuesday. Funny how life-altering moments rarely choose grand days. No storm, no holiday, just a flat, gray Tuesday. I had been nursing my first venture, a tiny online service matching local freelancers with odd jobs. The concept was simple, maybe too simple. Most people dismissed it as another useless app, but I believed in it. I saw kids like me, people written off, overlooked, who had skills but no connections. If I could build a bridge, maybe I could prove that usefulness is often just unseen. But belief doesn't pay server bills. That Tuesday, I logged in to see my account balance dip under zero. Rent was due in 5 days. My fridge held nothing but mustard and half a loaf of bread. My mother had called earlier asking if I needed anything. Her voice worried, and I lied, said I was fine. The weight of that lie sat heavier than hunger. That afternoon, as if fate enjoyed irony, I bumped into Caleb, one of the loudest voices from the old office days. He had once led the chorus of Useless with relish. He saw me on the street, eyed my worn shoes, and smirked. Still chasing dreams? Thought you'd have quit by now. I smiled because anger would have given him too much, but inside something cracked. It wasn't just rage, it was exhaustion. Years of grinding, failing, and trying to turn insults into fuel had worn me thin. For the first time, I wondered if they had been right all along. Maybe useless wasn't an insult but a diagnosis. That night, I sat in the dark staring at my laptop screen. The app's dashboard mocked me with flat lines, no growth, no revenue. My hands hovered over the keyboard, ready to delete it all, to walk away, to surrender. I imagined telling my mother she had been right to worry, imagined packing up, maybe finding another warehouse shift and forgetting this whole foolish detour. But then I saw something. One notification, just one. A booking request from a stranger. A small job, fixing a neighbor's fence. The pay was tiny, barely enough to cover groceries. But it was real. Someone had used my platform. My hands shook as I accepted the request. It wasn't the money, it was proof. Proof that the idea wasn't worthless. Proof that usefulness is measured in action, not in the laughter of people too blind to see beyond their own pride. That single booking became my pivot. I doubled down. I called every contact, messaged strangers, begged freelancers to try my service for free just to create movement. Each small success was oxygen. The dashboard lines twitched upward, fragile but alive. The breaking point didn't end me. It broke the shell I'd been trapped in. I stopped caring about convincing the mockers. I stopped waiting for their validation. From that day, every ounce of my energy went into building for the people who believed in second chances. Because when you've been called useless long enough, the only real revenge is proving the world wrong by lifting others up. And that's exactly what I plan to do. Success doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It sneaks in, small at first, like cracks of light under a locked door. The one booking became 3. 3 became 10. Within months, the platform grew from a whisper to a conversation. Local freelancers started to trust it. Small businesses began to notice. For the first time, I felt the tide shift. But success comes with teeth. Suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. Reporters wanted interviews. Investors, Men in suits who once laughed at me sent polite emails asking for meetings. Every conversation carried undertones of prove yourself. I was still running operations from a one-room apartment with peeling paint, pretending the noise of my old fridge was office ambience. With growth came chaos. Customer complaints stacked up. Freelancers demanded faster payments. A system crash one Friday night nearly wiped out every booking we had. I didn't sleep for 2 days trying to patch it. And behind the noise, loneliness sharpened. Friends from before circled back, not to celebrate me, but to angle for opportunities. Caleb messaged me one evening, casual as if he'd never mocked me. "Hey man, heard you're doing good. Any chance you're hiring?" I stared at his words, wondering if I should feel triumph. Instead, I felt hollow. Even my mother, my quiet anchor, sensed the storm. She called one evening, her voice soft but edged with worry. "Son, don't lose yourself in this. You've worked too hard to become someone you're not." "I'm just trying to keep it alive, Ma." "Keeping it alive is one thing, but what about keeping you alive?" Her words stung. I had built everything to prove I wasn't useless, but in the process, I was becoming something else. Brittle, exhausted, consumed. The pressure wasn't just business, it was personal. Each new milestone, instead of joy, carried fear. What if I failed now? Failure in obscurity was one thing. Failure in the spotlight would confirm every cruel laugh, every smirk, every whisper of "I told you so." There was one night that nearly broke me. We had our first big investor pitch, a chance to secure funding that would transform the company. Hours before the meeting, my lead developer quit, citing burnout. Emails from users crashed in, servers faltered again, and suddenly I was back in that place of being the useless one. Only this time with a bigger audience watching. I slammed my laptop shut and sat in the dark, chest heaving. The weight of years pressed in, all the sacrifices, the nights of hunger, the debts of silence. I thought of everyone lining up to watch me succeed, and secretly to watch me fail. That was the paradox of the moment. I had everything to lose, and losing would cost more than obscurity ever did. And yet, in that furnace of pressure, something in me sharpened. I realized this wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't even about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. And that decision, the line between collapse and courage, was where the climax waited. The day of the pitch arrived with the kind of silence that feels like the world is holding its breath. I stood in the lobby of a glass tower downtown, my reflection stretched and distorted across marble floors. My suit was borrowed, a size too big in the shoulders. My hands sweated no matter how many times I wiped them against my pants. The investors were sharks, polished, practiced smiles that concealed teeth. They listened as I spoke about vision, about the forgotten workers, about creating an economy of second chances. Their eyes flicked between their watches and their notes, polite but distant. I could feel the verdict tightening around my throat. They don't believe you. Then it happened. Midway through my demo, the servers crashed again. The screen froze, the numbers vanished. For one suspended heartbeat, the room was nothing but static silence. I felt every insult from my past echo at once. Useless, useless, useless. A laugh rose in my throat. Not the laugh of humor but of despair. I saw their smirks, the way one leaned back as if to say, just another dreamer with nothing to show. Something in me broke open. I closed the laptop and said, "You know what? Forget the slides. Forget the charts. You don't need my numbers, you'll never trust them. Let me tell you what I've seen." And I told them. I told them about the warehouse workers with degrees they'd never used. The single mother who fixed fences at night just to keep the lights on. The young man who had been told he was too stupid for college but who, through my platform, had become the go-to electrician in his neighborhood. "These are people you call invisible?" I said, voice shaking. "But they are the backbone of every city, every company, every economy. And if you don't want to invest in them, fine. Because I will. With or without you." For a long moment, silence held the room. Some of them looked away. Some tapped their pens. One, just one, leaned forward with interest. I walked out not knowing if I'd won or destroyed everything. But when the elevator doors slid open to the street, I froze. Outside, in front of the office I had scraped together months earlier, a line had formed. Not of investors, not of critics, of people. Freelancers, job seekers, worn shoes, hopeful eyes. Word had spread that the platform was real, that opportunities existed. They weren't waiting for validation from a boardroom. They were waiting for a chance. And in that moment, everything crystallized. The insult that had haunted me, the years of shadows, the hunger, the cold, all of it bent toward this image. A line of people who believed. They had called me useless. But here they were, standing outside my office, waiting for a future that my so-called useless hands had built. And for the first time in my life, I believed it too. The line outside my office never left me. It grew day by day until it stretched around the block. Not just workers and freelancers, but families, students, neighbors, all waiting not just for a job, but for the dignity that came with being needed. I used to think success was measured in numbers, in the rise of a graph, the commas in a bank account. But standing at that office window, watching people who had once been overlooked walk in with hope and walk out with opportunity, I understood something deeper. Success is when the word that once broke you becomes powerless. Useless. That word had followed me like a shadow for years. It had been shouted across offices, whispered in break rooms, etched into my own self-doubt. I carried it like a stone in my chest, proof that I wasn't enough. But the truth is, a word only has as much power as the story you let it tell. And I had rewritten mine. Caleb showed up one morning. The same smirk, though dimmer now, carrying a resume instead of an insult. He stood in the line like everyone else, shuffling his feet, avoiding my eyes. For a second, I wanted revenge, to send him away, to let him feel what I had felt. But then I remembered, this was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. So I shook his hand. Not because he deserved it, but because I did. My mother came to visit months later. She sat in my office chair, her rough hands smoothing across the desk like it was something fragile. She looked at me with eyes that had seen too many nights of sacrifice and said simply, "I always knew you weren't useless. It wasn't the validation I was chasing. It was something better, peace." The investors eventually circled back, offering checks and promises, but by then I had learned not to build for them. I built for the people who stood in the line. Because every time that door opened, I saw my own younger self walking in, hungry, doubtful, desperate for a chance. I gave him one. The city began to change. Small by small, block by block, people who had been invisible became indispensable. And if you looked closely, you could see it, the quiet revolution of usefulness reclaiming its place in the world. I sometimes walk past that old office where the first line formed. It's bigger now, gleaming and busy, but I always pause at the door, not to admire what I built, but to honor the moment I stopped believing the lie of a single word. They called me useless, but useless is just a word, and words, like people, can be rewritten.